Nebuchadnezzar. That's how great you think this thing that you have built is. It reminds me a lot of a story in Genesis 11, in verse 4. Genesis chapter 11, verse 4. You put your thumb in Daniel and go back to Genesis. After the flood, these people get together and they say, let's break bricks. In verse 4 they say, then they said, come, let's build a great city for ourselves with a tower that reaches into the sky. This will keep us famous. It will make us famous and keep us from being scattered all over the world. You see, every time, and this happened, by the way, verse 2, in the plain of the land of Babylonia. Every time you see the word Babylon in Scripture, especially if you deal in prophecy, you're talking about the antithesis of God's true people. It's characterized by a couple things. Because every time it comes up, you see this. Last story, remember how we talked about when the music plays, you bow down. It's focused on worship by form, not from heart. Okay? Every time you see Babylon, it's talking about dealing with worship from form, not from true response. That's false religion. Secondly, it puts itself in the place of God, saying, I'm going to build this thing up till I don't need God anymore. I have created something where I am an equal with God. You're this tree that thinks that it reaches up into the sky, touches heaven and earth, joins them together. You're like a god, Nebuchadnezzar. Same as those guys who built the Tower of Babel. You think that you're huge. It's a sign of Babylon. Every time you see it, those are the key distinguishing marks of what Babylon is. It's about putting yourself in the place of God. It's about building something huge. And it's about worship where you're forcing others to worship whether you believe it or not. Okay? That tree is you. Wild animals lived under it. Verse 22, that tree is you, for you've grown strong and great. Your greatness reaches up to heaven, and you rule the ends of the earth. Then you saw a messenger, a holy one, coming down from heaven, saying, cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump and the roots in the ground, bound by a band of iron and bronze, and surrounded by tender grass. Notice how now the metaphor shifts. Leave the roots there, and then it's bound. How do you bind a tree? Bring it to slavery. You are now slave to me, tree stump. Okay, then we're shifting that metaphor into that metaphor of an animal. Surrounded by tender grass, let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, let him live with the animals of the field for 7 periods of time. This is what the dream means. You'll be driven from human society, you will live in the fields with the wild animals, you will eat grass like a cow, and you'll be drenched with dew of heaven. 7 periods of time will pass while you live this way until you learn that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of the world and gives them to anyone he chooses. In other words, you're not king. But the stump and roots of the tree were left in the ground. This means you can receive your kingdom back again when you have learned that heaven rules.